Chapter 16. The Job Market. Have you ever seen that bumper sticker that reads, "Truckers Move America"? Or how about the one that says, "Without trucks, America stops"? Both of these statements are absolutely, positively, 100% true. Trucks move approximately 70% of freight in the United States. The remainder is moved by plane, train, or boat. But guess who hauls it from the plane, train, or boat to the stores where you can actually buy it? By and large, nearly everything that you have ever bought has been brought to you by a truck driver. Do you like that shirt you're wearing? Do you look back at that spiffy new car with a smug little grin every time you walk away from it? Do you worship at the pegboard altar of tools in the garage? Are you afraid to walk out of the house without putting on makeup and fixing your hair? Stop and think about what your life would be like without all those products the next time you're about to show a trucker your middle finger. According to one study, there are approximately 3.5 million licensed professional truck drivers on America's roads today. Of those, 1.3 million are long-haul or over-the-road truck drivers. Despite that, there is still a massive shortage of drivers. Or is there? Some would say that there isn't an actual shortage of drivers. It's just that not all truckers are willing to drive under the current conditions, meaning rising regulations and low pay. While that might be so, these are the conditions that we're living under, so like it or not, it's causing a driver shortage. How much of a shortage? Well, the American Trucking Association estimates that there is a current need for 30,000 drivers. Taking into account our normal economic growth and the continuing trend of driver shortages, the future outlook appears even worse, with the whopping 239,000 driver shortage by the year 2022. Why is there such a shortage of drivers? It all comes down to the fact that truck driving is a job many people don't want. You're usually away from home and family for long periods of time. If you figure a trucker's paid by the hour, it's really not that impressive. There's a lot of sitting and waiting. Some say the shortage is due to how truckers are treated by both the public and the trucking industry as a whole. All these things can be true, but they don't have to be. I decide how long I want to be away from home. I justify my pay per hour because I know that I probably can't make more money doing anything else without having a college degree. Sitting and waiting is definitely part of the job that I hate, but it's something I've learned to accept. When it comes to the public's perception of trucking and truckers, well, what do they know about the life of a trucker? Lastly, if my company treated me like rubbish, I'd find another company who treated me with the respect I deserve. The final point is that shortages in any occupation are there for a reason. If you don't like to tell lies, you probably wouldn't be interested in becoming a lawyer or a politician. If you aren't comfortable dealing with animals, you wouldn't want to be a veterinarian. For obvious reasons, there's likely a shortage of septic tank cleaners. Trucking has its problems too. It's safe to say that there wouldn't be a shortage of truck drivers if a driver could make $75,000 a year and be home every night, but they can't. Until they do, don't hold your breath, you have to weigh your options and see if your sacrifices will be worth it. That's why you're listening to this book, isn't it? This shortage of truckers is bad news for the economy, but good news if you're a truck driver, primarily because you know you'll always be in high demand. Do you remember the law of supply and demand from junior high civics class? If a product, like truck drivers, is in short supply, but the demand is high, your value just went up. It's true. Driver pay has been slowly rising ever since I got into the industry, and it'll likely continue to do so as long as there's a shortage of drivers. I will stress the word slowly there. Pay has been rising, but it sure doesn't seem to be keeping pace with the rest of the known universe. Not satisfied yet? Need more reasons why this shortage of drivers is so good for all truck drivers, including new ones? Here's what you can expect as a much sought-after truck driver. Job security. Better pay, better benefits, better home time, better equipment, and more perks. Let's talk about each one of these topics in more detail. Job security. If you're a run-of-the-mill middle manager who gets laid off, it's not likely that a bunch of companies will come pounding on your door to give you a job. The trucking industry is a bit different. Job security in trucking doesn't necessarily mean that you'll work for the same company for 30 years and retire with a gold watch and a cheesy jacket. Job security in trucking means that as long as you want to drive a truck and have even a mediocre work history, someone will always want to hire you. Even in a not-so-whoopee economy, someone will be hiring. During the hard times, carriers just get to be more selective. Watch the news for more than 5 minutes and you'll likely hear about some major company laying off workers by the hundreds or even thousands. That probably won't happen in trucking. Well, anything could happen. After all, Michael Jackson eventually turned into a white guy. But here's what's more typical. Let's say the trucking company you work for is struggling financially. Perhaps it's poor management that's causing this failure. Maybe it's a lack of freight due to losing their biggest and sometimes only customer. Or it could be the boss just lost his butt in a divorce. It really doesn't matter. What does matter is your job. Don't get your proverbial panties in a wad just because your company is folding. What usually happens is that the company gets sold to a bigger, and sometimes better, trucking company. Maybe the buyers have looked at the books and can see how to fix the problems. Maybe they're just looking to expand and the company you drive for is situated in the region they've been eager to get into. The point is, they've bought everything, including you. This could be a good thing, or it could be bad. You might not even notice a change except for the logo on the side of the truck. Heck, that might not even change. If it's good, you've got no worries. As an example, a previous employer of mine bought out 3 or 4 smaller trucking companies while I was there, and we never heard a peep out of those drivers. They got a huge jump in pay with the buyout. No wonder they weren't complaining. If it's bad and you absolutely hate your new company, what's the worst that can happen? You look for another job. It's not a bit of an exaggeration to say that you could quit a trucking job on Friday morning and be sitting in orientation class at your new company on Monday. I know because I've done it. The point is, there's always someone hiring in the trucking industry. If there was a buyout and you weren't happy, it's completely understandable why you're quitting. Your prospective new employer understands that circumstances were beyond your control. After all, you didn't hire on with them. It's like someone forced you to work for someone without giving you a choice in the matter. The bottom line is that you do have a choice, and no company expects you to stay where you are if you aren't happy. In all honesty, if you're not happy, your company probably doesn't want you around spreading bad vibes and telling their customers and other prospective drivers what an awful company they are, even if it's true. Not that you would do that, right? Hear me now and trust me on this. If you're a driver with a decent record and a mediocre work history, trucking companies will be kissing your patootie and begging you to work for them. Dear God, did I just use a Rosie O'Donnell word? Oh. When it comes to your work history, let me warn you now about the kiss of death. No, that's not a WWE wrestling move. Abandoning your truck is the kiss of death. Leaving it at a truck stop, a customer, or the side of the road is one of the worst things you can do as a trucker. Believe it or not, drivers sometimes do this. It may have been a bad day or a bad month, or 3. However steamed you are, keep your cool. When you do decide to quit, make sure you take the truck and trailer to wherever your boss tells you. It may not be near your house and you may have hot magma coming out of your ears, but hear this. If you abandon your truck, you just shafted yourself big time. It's the shafting of all shaftings in the trucking industry. They didn't do it to you. You did it, and the word will spread through the trucking industry like chicken pox at a daycare facility. As if being put on the blacklist isn't bad enough, many companies will report the truck as stolen if you don't return it to their specified location. Now, you may think that's unfair, but if someone took your personal vehicle on a trip and left it without your permission, you'd consider it stolen too, wouldn't you? Just return the stinking truck and save yourself the hassle. Okay, onward. Better pay. If you haven't already figured it out, most over-the-road drivers are paid by the mile. If you're a company driver, that includes all miles run, whether loaded or empty. Drivers get paid a specific amount per mile for however many miles they run in a given time period. Solo drivers receive the whole amount. Team drivers will usually split their pay rate, not their miles. In other words, if a team runs 5,000 miles in a given week, both will be paid for all 5,000 miles. How the pay is split between the two drivers depends on how much experience each driver has. If both team drivers have the same amount of experience, they'll split the pay equally. For example, if a team received 48 cents per mile, each driver would get paid 24 cents per mile for all miles run. However, if one driver had more experience, their portion might be 26 cents, while the new driver would only get 22 cents per mile. This doesn't really matter if the co-drivers are husband and wife, because both paychecks will likely be deposited into a joint checking account anyway. Even if the two drivers aren't married, it's still a fair process because one driver has more experience than the other. The reason team drivers split their pay rate rather than their miles is to make things both simpler and more financially equal. For example, if a team ran 5,000 miles, how would you know how many miles each person actually drove? Sure, you could keep track of it, but it still wouldn't work very well. You're just going to have to trust my 9 years of team driving here. Splitting actual driving miles wouldn't work very well. What would happen if you had a couple of days where all your loading and unloading took place during your driving shift? It wouldn't be fair for your co-driver to get paid to drive there while you sit for a couple of hours each day waiting at a dock. Or what if the truck broke down at the beginning of your driving shift and it was fixed just in time for your co-driver to start their driving shift? The system works, so just don't mess with it. Now back to why a driver shortage is good for drivers. A shortage of drivers means you're in great demand, especially if you have a good work history. Trucking companies are steadily raising pay to attract new drivers, and it's a trend that will likely continue as long as the shortage of drivers escalates. You may be thinking that this won't apply to you as a new driver. Au contraire. Even trainees directly out of driving school benefit here. I suppose a company could raise their wage only on the top end, but usually the raise goes across the board. Let's say you've been working for a company for 6 months. These sample pay rates I'm using are examples only. Say the company you've been working for has just implemented a 2 cent per mile pay raise for all drivers, so now you're making 36 cents per mile. Your company normally starts inexperienced drivers at 34 cents per mile, but that wage has also increased by 2 cents. So will a newly hired inexperienced driver start out at 36 cents also, even though they have less experience than you and less time with the company? Yes, they will. Now, you may not think that it's fair that a person with less time at the company makes the same wage as you, but you'll appreciate it later on when you decide to switch jobs. Let's say you stay with the company for 5 years, with regular raises to where you're now making 40 cents per mile. You decide to switch companies, and they tell you that since you're new to their company, you'll have to start at 34 cents per mile again. That wouldn't be very fair, now would it? That would mean that the only way you can make more money in the trucking industry is to stay at the same company for years and years. That rarely happens in trucking. This is why drivers are paid for total experience, not time spent at a company. When you switch to that new company, they'll pay you for the total experience you have, no matter how many different companies that you've worked for. Keep in mind that not every company has the same pay scale. For example, one company may pay 38 cents per mile for 5 years experience, while another might pay 40 cents for the same amount of experience. That's why it's so important to thoroughly check out each company's entire pay package to make sure what you're getting into before you hire on with them. Another type of pay that's increasing drastically is a sign-on bonus. A sign-on bonus is money paid to you over a period of time, usually a year or less, for hiring on and staying with the company. Some companies are now paying up to $3,000 or more for experienced drivers. Keep in mind the structure of the payment. If the entire bonus is paid at the end of your first year with the company and you quit at the 11-month mark, you'll get absolutely squat. Unfortunately, as a student fresh out of school, you may not be eligible for a sign-on bonus until you get some experience under your belt. Many companies will also pay you for referrals of new hires. For example, if you convince a driver from another company to come work for your company, you may get, say, $500 once he is hired on and stayed with your company for a specified length of time. That period may be 3 months or it may be 1 year. It all depends on your company's driver referral program. That's just one more way trucking companies are trying to attract new drivers. I once talked to a driver who had 9 referrals that were all being hired within a month. At $500 a pop, That's $4,500 extra that month. That's sweet. Of course, as all the weight loss pill disclaimers say, results may vary. So don't expect that to happen every month, or possibly ever. There's still more ways to sweeten the pot, though. Many companies are offering per diem pay to their drivers. Per diem pay is supposed to be used to cover your day-to-day expenses. What it effectively does is let you bring home more of your paycheck every week by holding out less taxes. It's more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. Some drivers love per diem, while others think it's a total ripoff. If your company offers per diem pay, they'll explain it to you in orientation, and you can make a decision from there. I've also included a link in the text version where you can go to check out a forum on per diem pay, and you can check out the differing opinions there. Some carriers are also offering paid holidays and/or more vacation time to attract more drivers. Some companies are even starting to offer guaranteed pay. Now, you know how I feel about guarantees in trucking, so my advice is to make sure you know what you're getting into here. There may be stipulations on the guarantee that aren't visible until you dive deeper. For instance, there could be a minimum mileage limit in order to get it. But do you control your mileage as a company driver? Or maybe the catch is that the guaranteed pay isn't available unless you work throughout the weekend. The possibilities are endless here, so just make sure you know what you're getting into. Better benefits. Medical costs are rising across the country. We've all heard it, and we've probably all felt it hit our wallets. My last company just had an increase in insurance costs, and they passed some of it right on down to the drivers. Still, it's usually cheaper to get health insurance from work than it is from the open market. I know because I've shopped it. What many employees forget is that benefits are called benefits for a reason. It's a benefit, not a right. I know it's common sense, but God knows many people lack what's supposed to be common. Our employers don't have to supply health insurance at all. It's a benefit to us that they pay a huge portion of our premiums. Remember pension plans? Most companies used to have them, but now only a handful still do. It just wasn't cost effective. I've heard plenty of experts say it's only a matter of time until health insurance benefits as we know them follow the pension plan into an early retirement. As employees, we aren't paying the full bill, so we really don't look at the hospital bill. We might have paid $100 for a stinking blanket that we didn't even get to take home. Let me rephrase that. Your company paid the largest portion of that, not you. See why it may not be around for long? I'm guilty of this too, but I'm trying to watch that hospital bill closer so that I can ask the hospital administrator if he'd like to pretend that $4 aspirin is a suppository. Wow, I went on a little soapbox tangent there, eh? Well, back to the subject. Trucking companies will continue to try to improve benefits to attract drivers. Some companies may make it a point to let you know that their insurance goes into effect immediately rather than the standard 60 or 90-day waiting period. They may even tout that they accept pre-existing conditions where others won't. Of course, pre-existing conditions may not be such a big deal with Obamacare in the picture. Larger free life insurance policies may be included too. The point here again is that they want you and need you, the driver, to make money for them, and they may sing the praises of their wondrous benefits to nab you. Better home time. As we discussed earlier, driver home time has become increasingly important to drivers. Not too long ago, the standard was for every week out, you got 1 day off. Many companies searching for new drivers are now offering a variety of options to get you home more often. Some guarantee to get you home on weekends, while others may offer 2 days off for every week on the road. Others will let you drive for 2 weeks and pass the truck off to another driver who takes it for 2 weeks. You'll continue to do that every 2 weeks. The fact remains that if you can think of a scenario, some trucking company probably has a plan to suit your needs. The options would utterly astound you. Again, your options may be limited as a newbie, but give it a while and more will come your way. If you're picky enough, you may even hire on with a company that gives you all the options from day one. Increased home time choices are just one more way companies are trying to draw you in. As discussed earlier, most companies will let you take your time off in the location of your choice. You'll just need to ask in advance. For example, one summer the evil overlord and I planned a mini vacation to Las Vegas with some close relatives. We called our fleet manager 3 weeks in advance and requested time off in Vegas. We delivered a load right there in Vegas just a day before our relatives arrived by plane. After a few days of fun and losing money, how can those two things go hand in hand? We picked up a load again right there in town and went back to work. So in essence, our company paid us to travel to and from Las Vegas, while our relatives dropped a load on airline tickets. Cool, huh? Just don't let anyone convince you of the whole see the world bit. You'll see America all right, through a windshield, and there isn't a whole lot of interesting stuff right on the interstate. Heck, trucks aren't even allowed in many of the scenic view rest areas. You might get to see some parts of America that you wouldn't in a normal job, but you'll usually have to make it happen. If you want to see the country and all of its interesting places, you're going to have to plan for it, just like we did for our Las Vegas jaunt. Still, at least it's possible. There were a few times when we got to be somewhere cool simply by chance. As I mentioned earlier, our truck broke down in Salt Lake City for 5 days, and we took advantage of the time off. That turned out all right, but the coolest thing, literally, happened in our first year of driving. During one cold, windy January day, we got stuck in Buffalo, New York without any freight. Once we got the okay from our dispatcher, we drove a few miles to Niagara Falls, paid to drop our trailer at a truck stop, and bobtailed down to the falls. The boats weren't running, and the town was completely deserted, but we walked into Canada for the first time while looking out at one of God's jaw-dropping creations. We also got to meet a nice young British couple who were there on holiday. I just love how they have their different words. We felt like a couple of popsicles while we walked off that bridge, but it was by far the most awesome thing we had ever seen or heard. Still, it only happened because we made the effort. We could have spent the day sulking in our truck instead. Similarly, we got trapped in Portland and Seattle, where we made the effort to go into town and enjoy ourselves. We got stuck in Dallas a few times, where a friend from our school days would come pick us up for a night out on the town. We visited the Mall of America, that's America's largest mall, when we had to wait on a load overnight in Minnesota. However, most of the time we chose to sit in the truck because we were in trucking to make money, not spend it. One of those times we spent $40 on cab fare to go downtown and back, so you can see how it might get expensive very quickly. Once we were stranded without a load in Orlando for a day, but didn't go to Disney World. We could have taken advantage of being stuck in Miami, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and many other cities across the U.S., but didn't. That was our choice. You can take advantage of those times if you don't mind forking over the cash. Personally, I'm a cheapskate, so now that the evil overlord is out of the truck, I never go anywhere interesting. Again, that's my choice. I choose to save money. Better equipment. Equipment generally refers to trucks and trailers. Some trucking companies love to claim that they have the newest fleet in the industry. It's true that nicer trucks do attract more drivers. It's a fact that the company bigwigs are well aware of. Would you rather drive that crusty 5-year-old truck with a flaky paint job and a little bitty tiny sleeper space, or a shiny new truck with all the bells and whistles, including a nice big sleeper? Well, that's a no-brainer. And you may be thinking, 5 years old isn't so bad. Well, maybe not for a car, but remember, a truck gets about 120,000 miles per year on it. 600,000 miles doesn't sound so great now, does it? Now double that if a team has been driving it. Whew, that's not so whoopee now, eh? Not to mention the buildup of butt funk on the driver's seat that's been accumulating for 5 years. Most of the large trucking companies are trading in their trucks sooner than ever so they can boast as having the newest fleet in the industry. Get ready to hear that often. More perks. In a typical job, a perk might be a company car, a corner office, or a discount on merchandise. In trucking, we're talking about the little things that make your life on the road more tolerable. Things like free satellite radio, toll passes, pre-pass, that's a gadget that lets you go around way stations, or in-truck satellite email services, just to name a few. And by the way, pre-pass is your best friend if you're going to be in California a lot. Those scale houses suck. Some bigger perks you'll notice are things that make your job easier. Advertising for trucking companies will usually say something like 80% drop and hook, 97% no-touch freight. The numbers will vary from carrier to carrier, but these figures are letting you know that this particular company won't require you to unload their trucks on a regular basis, which is a good thing. Drivers make more money when they drive, not load or unload trailers. Again, drop and hook means that you'll simply drop the trailer you're hauling to the customer and grab or hook another on the way out. No-touch freight means that the customer will load or unload the product. You know touchy the freighty. In this case, the carrier is trying to attract drivers by letting them know that 80% of the time, you won't even have to back up to a dock at all, and the times that you do, 97% of the time, you won't have to physically load or unload it. Look for these figures when you're choosing a trucking company. The higher percentages of both, the better. And this all adds up to professional drivers are needed worse than ever before. If you don't like your first driving job, you'll have plenty more to choose from. Now, I'm not suggesting you job hop. The evil overlord and I were told in driving school not to job hop because it wouldn't look good to future employers. We found that to be partially true. There are drivers who stay with a company for a week or a month, get cheesed off one day, then move on to what they think are greener pastures. If you decide trucking is for you, then don't be one of these guys. You can't tell anything about a company in that length of time. These guys are considered bad news by trucking companies. Why would a company want to spend all the time, money, and effort to hire you when you have a history of job hopping? Sometimes, though, a company just doesn't fit you. Give it a few months and then move on. Nobody's work history is flawless, and trucking companies generally understand this. I've even known drivers who were fired within the first 6 months. A week later, they're starting orientation at another company. So now we've discussed what it takes to drive a truck on a personal level. We've also discussed what qualifications you need to be eligible to drive a truck. Furthermore, you've seen that if you decide to pursue this career, you're definitely needed and desired by many trucking companies. So what's the next step?